Hello, welcome to The Cheer Athlete. On this week's episode, we have a compilation of videos that started when I was doing my other podcast called Move Better Podcast. And I was doing some podcast and vlogs, which I think is a funny word, on that podcast regarding cheer athletes. So this is the introduction. I'm going to include some of these interspersed through the next couple of weeks. If you have any questions about anything, we're going to dive into topics that is important to all cheer athletes, from a history of cheerleading into different ankle sprains, back pain, and all of the above. If there's anything that you'd like to learn and want to know, then check this out, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.
Today we're going to talk a little bit about stamina. It's something I see all the time, it's very true as cheerleaders and every sport, but in cheerleading you need 2 minutes and 30 seconds of major stamina. That means you need to be strong. You need to be able to run, not necessarily really run, but like your adrenaline's going. You need to be able to have enough strength, endurance, and ability to maintain safety and awareness for 2 minutes and 30 seconds straight. It's a lot of work. I think it's important to build that work off the mat. We incorporate that into our regular practices, but and it will eventually get easier. With repetition comes success, and perfection. So the more you practice something, and the more you learn something, and the more you fall and then get back into it, the better it will be, because your brain learns how to do that. So learning technique and learning, memory and memorizing will all help stamina also. But where do you build your stamina to get there? Be able to get through a 2.5 hour practice, or two 2-hour practices if you're in competition season or preseason and learning routines. So where do you build that? You build that now. So right now is the summertime and you're not in practice, and it's right now in 2020 and it's August 2nd. So you might be this is just the end of the quarantine time, and you probably haven't been back into cheerleading in general. So you can't go backwards. What can we do going forward? When you're in the off season, that's your time to really build your strength and your stamina and maintain that. Doesn't mean you have to go hardcore, no. And doesn't mean you should be cheering to do that, no. It means you do different kinds of conditioning. We don't run in cheerleading, in general, for distance. But running is a great way to build your stamina. Doing sprints will build a little bit more cheer conditioning. To get into that 2 minutes and 30 second strength and conditioning role, you may need about 10 minutes. But to be able to do that for practice, you need that will help to get your heart rate up and build your conditioning and build your endurance up. You could bike ride, you could swim. It's good to actually mix them all up, because that's going to change your body and your muscle pull to help you be able to build your stamina when you're on the floor. Building your strength. That's the time to build that stamina and strength training when you're out of season. I also think it's important to train through season, but your training during season is going to be different than it is off season. If you're an all-stars, your off season is probably shorter than it is if you're a high school cheerleader. So that might vary a little bit. And if you're doing both, your off season may be like 2 weeks. Your training may have to evolve around that depending on where you're at. And I absolutely encourage, take some time off, because your body needs that chance to recover and do something different, whether it's strength training, conditioning, or, a whole other sport. That's not necessarily the realm of this discussion, but building your stamina absolutely means you have to do the work off the cheer mat. I would recommend, if you have practice in the evening, make sure you give yourself enough time in between to do your conditioning at a separate time. We all, when I was coaching, we used to do conditioning at the end of practice. We would warm up, and then we would do our conditioning at the end of practice. Looking back, I think it needed to happen, but I also think I wish my team had been a little bit more into conditioning on their own, or outside of practice, because right after practice, you're hungry, you're tired, you're not going to put your full effort in, and it's not going to do you any good in the long run. You need to put the work in outside. I know it's hard. We have school all day, or, if you're out of season, you may have a job, and, it's hard to necessarily fit that workout time in, but it's important. During season, 20 minutes might be all you need. And maybe you do some of the videos that are online and, do a quick HIIT workout, 2 or 3 times a week. You can't do HIIT workouts 7 days a week. It's not good for your body. You'll wreck your tendons, you'll wreck your bones, you'll wreck your muscles. Your body will just break down and get fatigued. So you've got to give yourself some time off. Sometimes you got to do those HIIT workouts. What's a HIIT workout? It's high intensity interval training. It's actually what we do in cheerleading. So I would recommend in season, you don't actually do more HIIT workouts. So a HIIT workout would be something like you go all out for a period of time. And that's usually a short period of time, like 30 seconds to maybe up to a minute, sometimes 2 minutes. And then you let your heart rate come down and you take a little interval and you push again. Or it could be you do like 30 seconds of jumping jacks, 30 seconds of plank, back up to 30 seconds of jumping jacks down, and then you switch it up and mix it. And you can do different conditioning, do different lengths of time depending on what the goal is for that workout. But I wouldn't do more than 2 to 3 of those in an off season. And really, when you're in practice, because most of the work is that high intensity work, you're probably better off during season to actually do more conditioning and steady state work. Lower intensity, train your heart rate to cardiovascular work, so you get into like that 75% of your maximum heart rate range, which if you have questions, leave me a comment below. I'm more than happy to provide more information for you for that. Or send me an email and we can have I can email you how to figure out what's my target heart rate zone, because it varies depending on where you're at. But it's probably better to train in your cardiovascular zone, which will train your heart to pump out blood, get blood to your brain. Like, that's really good for your body, and you pretty much could do that every day. But again, you want to mix it up. If you're just talking like if you're off season building stamina, you want to train your body in different ways. Make sure that you are building strength, which is really lower heart rate, but it works your muscles differently, gets good pull on your bones to help. That's where you get your tone from, which we all want to look toned, but it's also where you get the power to be able to lift somebody. Plyometric drills are an amazing way to build some stamina into your regular routine. You may not need to do plyometrics in season, or maybe you do like less volume, so less repetitions and not as intense of plyometrics. And then in your off season, you may ramp that up and do more so that you are building power and building your endurance and building your stamina outside, and then you carry that in. Obviously, if your workouts are minimum when you're at practice, then maybe you need to add a little bit more outside. What can you do in your regular routine during season? Yes, you should still strength train twice a week. Yes, you should still do some steady state cardio and some, whether it's higher intensity, like medium to high intensity, and some lower intensity, mix that up a little bit. Stretching, mobility work. I no longer really advocate for static stretching. If you're gonna do static stretching, do it after your workout, after your warm up, after your practice, after your workout at home. You do a little stretch before you work out, just because you're sitting around and you want to work out, then you need to do some active work to get your muscles actually contracting and moving through their full range of motion, not just holding steady and holding into a stretch. Yes, if you hold a stretch for 2 minutes, you might make some length changes, but if you don't have the stability to, on the flip side, or in we call them antagonistic muscles, or the muscles that even are synergistic, they help. Either the muscles that are opposed or that help with, if you don't have the stability there and you're just stretch, you're gonna lose stability, and it's actually just they're gonna clamp right down and tighten back up again. So what do I recommend instead is active mobility work. Taking your body through 3 planes of motion, exploring motion, finding a nice stretch, getting some eccentric length, so eccentric is our muscles will, when we have 3 muscle contractions. One's an isometric, and the muscles stay here and you don't actually create any movement with the joints, but the muscle spindles will tighten and contract. As you do a concentric, which is a shortening contraction, the muscles come in this way and it shortens the muscle. So if you do a bicep curl, this is a concentric muscle contraction on the bicep. And then we have eccentric, which is lengthening. And the lengthening, eccentric contraction happens, it basically slows the joint down. It controls the muscle and the spindles lengthen, and then they slow and they control the motion down. Well, that's super important. Like as you land a jump, you need that eccentric length to really be able to absorb and land. It's super important as you walk because you need to have a full, you get the eccentric stretch to be able, once you get that stretch, it actually tells the joint like, hey, don't do that, and it starts to contract again. So that goes for everything that we do. The muscles are lengthening and shortening all the time, but it's that lengthening at the end range that it says, hey, spring back into place and let's propel you forward. And so that's really important in cheer. So doing some eccentric work and to help build that. I like to do it outside and just body weight exercises, but doing eccentric work with weights may transition into that also. But there's a lot of things you can do standing, you can do like on off through the day, and that's stuff that you really can do all the time until you have that muscle soreness, and then you're gonna back off a little bit and then you move forward. That's how you build stamina. Gradually over time, stay with it. Stamina building, endurance building, conditioning, strength training, that's a year-round 24/7 process. No, that's not true. You need to take a day off. You need to let your body recover and rest. But it's something that you have to do on a regular basis, and you have to stay with. And the more you do it, the easier it's going to be to when you get on that mat and you're ready to go win that championship and come home with the gold. Or even just getting through a game, which a football game can be 4 hours long. Like that's a ridiculous amount of time. I love football games. I think it's amazing, and I hate when football games end because I think it's so fun, like to watch the game and watch the cheerleaders and toss some stunts. But like, man, 4 hours of workout, that's a lot. If you're tossing, if your team's is killing it on the field and you are doing push-ups after every touchdown, like my cheerleaders at Holy Cross, they were not happy with me one time because we were like at 42 or 54 points, I think it was. And I was like, yeah, you still got to do your push-ups. Now I'm like, maybe we could have found something different because that's a lot of push-ups. I don't even know if cheerleaders do push-ups at games anymore. I don't necessarily, what I liked about them, I don't think that's a great way to build your strength and your endurance, nor do I think it's a good way to get out of your head if you come out of a stunt. I don't think like doing push-ups anymore. I don't think that's, my mind has changed since that, because coming out of a stunt, like you got to regroup, you got to focus. Just getting down to do push-ups is not going to necessarily make you focus. I think there could be better ways. But that's, building your endurance and your stamina, yeah, maybe it might contribute to that a little bit. Do it on the football field, what I like about the football field is like it always gets people looking. Like crowds, they sometimes notice when we stunt, they always notice when we're doing push-ups, especially if we're not doing them correctly. And again, that's going to come a little later. But I digress. Always I digress. Building up your stamina off the field to be able to do those push-ups is key. Do you have to do 54 push-ups in 7 increments all the way up? No. There's probably something more fun to be able to do. But, being able to do them, that's pretty amazing. And that does take stamina. Building the stamina comes off the field. So I hope that answers some questions about stamina, how to build it. I'm happy to, if you have questions about what are some other exercises you can do to help building that, please send me an email, leave me a comment below. I'm happy to, talk things through with you and see if we can plan things around. The key is build your stamina so that you can get through a routine, get through your games, and get through your practices safely without risk of injury.
You still use static stretching as your only way to warm up? Do you use conditioning at the beginning of a workout or practice or an event to get ready to then go and perform and work out and practice? In this episode of the Move Better with the Cheer PT podcast and vlog, we're going to talk about when you should condition, when you should static stretch, and why it's important to not do those at the beginning of a practice or right before a practice. Let's talk a little bit about stretching. Stretching has gotten a bad rap in the last 10 years or so. There was some research out a while back that static stretching right before an event would actually lower power and lower your ability to perform and to, excuse me,
to do the skills that you need to do. It actually sets you up for a bigger risk of injury, and they were looking at lifting as opposed to necessarily in a sporting event, but that translated to a sporting event. So, and in the strength and conditioning world, we kind of got away from static stretching altogether. Well, really, what the research shows is that if you stretch longer than 60 seconds before you are going to do a lift or do something, whatever that might be, an event, you would lose that power. And there was also a time frame between the stretch and a workout. What I take that to mean is that it's still okay to do some static stretching before. And what I've learned in the recent past from my strength and conditioning certifications is that it's actually good to do a little static stretching. Maybe you foam roll, maybe then you stretch, so you kind of warm the tissues up a little bit, get things moving. Then you do your holding stretch. So a static stretch is one that you are going to hold for maybe 15 to 30 seconds. So it's not a full 60-second change mechanics, but it's just to warm the tissue up. Then you get into a dynamic warm-up. A dynamic warm-up is different than conditioning. It doesn't mean, I'm going to go on a rant a little bit about this because I've worked with some cheerleaders recently who told me that their warm-up is they stretch a little bit and then they get into their tumbling drills and their jump drills and their stunt drills, and then they get into practice. Well, by then you're exhausted, and it's, of course, stunts are going to come down if you're doing repetition after repetition after repetition. So instead, what is important, because if you went to the gym, you wouldn't be doing reps of, cleans and jerks and squats to do your warm up. You're going to loosen your muscles up. Maybe you do a light set just to, to prepare you for where you're going. But you need to loosen your joints up. You need to loosen your hips up, your shoulders. So a dynamic warm up is one that you are creating mobility through your muscles, getting your joints to move appropriately, and getting the muscles and the tendons ready so they have blood flow and they're loosened up and active and prepped and ready to go for whatever it is that you're going to do. So in a workout, it's important to do a dynamic warm-up. I like to include breathing because that's, for me, activates my core, gets me going. Some spinal cogs and mobility because that kind of loosens the spine up. And I'll do those in lying down or on hands and knees in different positions. I like to do some bridging. That it extends your hips a little bit. It gets your glutes ready to go. And it just kind of prepares some extension because we're all sitting here like this all day. I'd like to do some core work, maybe some planks and alternating bird dogs, something to just really kind of tell my abs, my obliques, my back muscles, hey, we're going to do some work and you need to be ready to go. Then I'll get into some inchworms, which will incorporate some posterior line and core at the same time. Maybe some Spider-Mans to get your hips loosened. Maybe some happy babies. It doesn't matter as long as you get a variety in. One thing I find missing in a lot of cheer workouts or warm-ups is getting some shoulder mobility, getting your shoulder blades working. If we're holding things overhead or we're tumbling, those shoulder blades actually need to be stronger than our deltoids and our pecs. They need to be working to stabilize and hold and help the rotator cuff. So maybe doing some band pull-aparts or, even just some, I call these goalpost to touchdown motions, where you're keeping your shoulder blades engaged and you're creating some movement and stability through the shoulders and the shoulder blades. The key is we need to warm up the muscles that we're using and the joints that we're using, and the opposite to help stabilize that we're doing. So if we're always holding out here, we need to work back here. If you can't see me, if you're listening to this on the podcast, I have my hands forward like where I'm holding a stunt, and then out to the side like a W position. Taking our body through full range of motion and not necessarily holding that static stretch, but moving in and out of it in a forward and back motion helps to create that stability. You watch football players on the field, they are walking and stretching at the same time. They're not standing. They may do a little static stretch to start, but then they're getting to some walking lunges or Frankenstein walks or their hip circles and open and close the gate. all other sports except for cheerleading does these dynamic warm-ups, and they're important. They don't just get in, yes, sometimes like a basketball team, they're going to go and shoot layups, but they've already done their warm-up beforehand. Those are practice drills, and that should be part of practice. When you get into conditioning and you use your stunting, your tumbling, and your jumping for conditioning, it actually wears you out ahead of time. Perhaps it could be said that you could do that conditioning at the end of practice, but really your conditioning work to build your endurance that you're going to be able to get through a 2-hour practice and get through a 2.5-minute routine or a workout needs to be done outside of practice. Now, if you're working out, that I consider conditioning at the end of practice. So a good workout in the gym might include a static stretch, foam roll, static stretch, and then some dynamic work to loosen your hamstrings, loosen your hip flexors, loosen your glute muscles, get your shoulder blades active and create some mobility through your shoulders, maybe some neck mobility. Then you jump into your strength work, and you're going to include all those 6 to 7 key components, a squat, a lunge, a deadlift, a row, or a pulling motion, and a pushing and a pulling and a pushing motion, so that and then a carry and some core. So you incorporate that, and however way you're going to do that for your workout. And if you want more advice, please reach out, because I'd love to talk about this and how I program. But you can work it however works in your own body. And then after that, you're going to go do your conditioning work. If you add 10 minutes at the end of a workout and do a nice high intensity, burpees or mountain climbers or swings, or you go do sprints, any of that for just 10 minutes at the end of your lift, then you get your heart rate up and you've done a little bit of conditioning. And then at the end, you're going to do some static stretching. I'll talk about more static stretching in a second. It's also important you could do your conditioning, and you should do longer conditioning, maybe a slower intensity, or 1 or 2 high intensity interval work in between your strength sessions. It's the same as when you're cheering. You're going to do your foam roll if you're doing that, static stretch, then get into some dynamic work where you're doing more active and you're activating your core and you're working your legs and you're stretching out, you're actively taking your legs through the motion that they're going to do. So if you're going to do kicks or jumps that day, maybe you do some kicks and you're working on core stability by keeping your ribs down and your arms in a T or in a high V, and you work the kicks on either side. But you're not doing 1,000 of them at once. A warm-up should be 5 repetitions, maybe 10, not a 30-second hold on a plank, but maybe a 5-second hold, and maybe do 3 reps. So it's a shorter duration, and you really just get your body going. After you get into your warm-up, then you get into your practice. And, maybe you run through your tumble skills and your jumps and your basic stunts to warm them up 1 or 2 times before you get into actually putting your routine and whatever you're doing through practice together that day. At the end, if you have time, do some conditioning. In this instance, where you've been through practice, I wouldn't use stunts and tumbling and jumping as your conditioning. That's when I would actually get down and, okay, we're going to do burpees, or we're going to do sprint drills, or whatever that might be, something different that's less risk of injury. At the end, always, always, always save time at the end, maximum 10 minutes, to do 10 minutes of stretching. And this is where you're going to hold those static stretches. So the end of a workout or the end of a practice or a competition or a game, that's when you're going to go and you're going to hold those static stretches. Give them about 60 seconds. Hamstrings, straddle stretches. Make sure you stretch your hips out, because stretching your internal and external rotators will allow that turnout for your jumps. Maybe you're holding a back bend, or I love hands behind your back, like right about your belt level line, and pinching your elbows together. That's a great way to open up your chest and then hold that. That's not going to put the shoulder blades or the shoulders and the anterior shoulder at risk, but it will stabilize through the shoulder blades and create better movement there, instead of just whipping and having somebody pull them back and crank on you. You can do assisted stretching for sure, but listen to what your body's telling you and go to the individual's endpoint, as opposed to trying to push, crank on it and really make the maximum. You do want to stretch to your ability level, but you don't need to force it. Give that time at the end of practice for that longer hold and longer stretch, and put the emphasis there. Performing this way and incorporating, proper warm up, proper lift, and practice time, and conditioning and stretching into a regular routine will help reduce injuries. It's going to reduce the overstrain and the overuse injuries. It's going to set you up for less risk of rolling your ankle and create better stability. And so you have more strength to be able to go and do what you want to do and perform better stunts and higher stunts and all of that. Or if you're listening to this and you're a parent, it's going to allow you to be able to shovel better and react quicker when you are needing to be in those situations. Let me know if you have any questions. Please leave a comment below. Reach out. I have plenty of workouts and stretches and different workout routines and conditioning routines that I would love to send you. If you want more information on that, please don't hesitate to reach out. And if you are looking for more information, you can reach me on all social media, and the link is in the comments below, as well as a link to the Healthy Cheerleader Challenge, 7-day cheerleading challenge, which talks about food, nutrition, workouts, and mindset, and different ways to just incorporate an overall well-rounded healthy cheerleader. And I also, if you're not into cheerleading and you're listening to this, I have a tip for health and wellness in general. There's a link for that in the link tree below. Have a wonderful day. Don't forget, when in doubt, breathe it out. Take life one step at a time, and always find the beauty in the day. And as my dear friend Drew Kelleher said, you are responsible for your own vibes. So go out there, have a great day, and I will see you next time. Take care.